Hello, and welcome to the Write Club podcast, where we take you behind the pages and into the fascinating world of writing. I'm Mary, and this is Beth, and we're part of the team at Writing Magazine and Writers Online. Hi, Beth, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Our guest this week is the very impressive Faith Hogan. Faith Hogan is an award-winning million-copy best-selling author. She is a USA Today bestseller, Irish Times Top 10 and an Amazon UK #1 best-selling author of 11 contemporary fiction novels. Her books have featured as book club favourites, NetGalley hot reads and some must-reads. She writes women's fiction which is unashamedly uplifting, feel-good and inspiring. The Women at Ocean's End is her brand new summer read. A captivating saga of secrets and friendship set on a beautiful island on the wild Atlantic Way in the west of Ireland. She lives in the west of Ireland with her family. Hello, Faith. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me and for having me on. It's lovely to be here and lovely to meet both of you. Yeah, it's really lovely to be here.
Thank you. Welcome, Faith. And where do we find you today?
Funny day, strange day in the Hogan house. Normally I work from home. Today I am, believe it or not, hot desking in a very echoey room, I think. And I only just arrived to open my diary and find out I was running a half an hour late.
Happens to the
But
best of
never
us.
mind. Yeah. Our house is so we have quite a busy house in summertime. I have 4 children and 3 are back from college, but my youngest has just decided to start a rock band and they are practicing at home today. And I'm in the thick of edits and editing for me, I can write and I don't hear what's going on around me. Nobody, you can blow the house up and I'm not even going to notice. Edits are different. I kind of need quiet time. So I decided I was going to take myself away for 3 days this week and just focus on the edits because my edits are there's quite a bit to do in them at the moment. So yeah, we're on a deadline. So yeah, I'm here in a very white room with great echoey sound.
And we really are looking forward to talking to you about your latest novel. But I'd love to know first about your route to publication and what other jobs have you had along the way, and what was the catalyst to writing full time?
Sure. Right. Well, let me see. I suppose like every writer, I started off as being a reader. And in our house, there was always books. There was always books on the go. My mother was a great reader and read us, I suppose, and told us stories really at night time rather than read us stories. I'd say it was probably her way of getting away from us a bit quicker. Sometimes it was the same story for maybe 6 or 7 nights on the trot. She probably got very bored of it. But yeah, and then along the way, I think by the time before I left primary school here, I was already writing. We had a small school newspaper, and I managed to see my name in a byline. Really, probably the worst thing that ever happened to me in some ways. And I started writing then, but I didn't start writing long fiction. I was writing short stories and poetry mostly. But had to pay the bills. So after school, went to college, did marketing first of all, and then went back and did a degree in psychology and English lit. Because my first love was always English lit, but I knew I wouldn't be a teacher. I'm just not. I knew teaching kind of wouldn't do it for me. It's very sort of. I just had this feeling I'd be very trapped in it. And I admire teachers. I think they do a great job. But I don't think I'd be able to do that. And so I ended up by default in the disability field, learning disability and mental health. Now, on the way to that, I ended up working as an events organizer. I did a little bit of modeling, very short. What else did I do? I did retail management for a while. And then I ended up and I spent 20 years working in the disability field. I found it incredibly fulfilling. And also, I suppose it gave me time to write while I went to work. Sometimes I could think about the story I was writing when I'd be sitting in a meeting. Please don't tell my former employer this. I think I was wonderful. But yeah, so that was kind of the run up to it. Then in when I became pregnant, I got married in 2000 and oh God, I don't know, 2002. My children were on the way, and I had twins, and I ended up having to take 3 months off. And I thought, well, it's either now or never. if I don't write this novel now that I've been thinking about writing for years, I'm never ever going to do it. So I had 3 months, and I didn't write it in 3 months. It took me a lot longer. But by the time the children had by the time I went back to work after maternity leave, I had written a full novel. It wasn't my best novel. Wasn't even a good novel. There were it lacked basic things like punctuation, which we find is great in a novel, makes it easier. But I came to the end of it and I had done it. And there was a great sense of having accomplished something beyond myself, if you know what I mean. And so I had twins. I couldn't really do very much for quite a while after that. And then in quick succession, I had 1, 2, 3. So I had 4 children. And then somewhere along the way, I thought I needed to sort of dig out the books again. And I started to write again. And I think I had 2, maybe 3 books in the bottom drawer by the time I actually had the courage to go and find an agent. I was shortlisted for a competition here in Ireland. It's the not Writers' Fair, the Irish Writers' Centre Novel Fair. And I met lots of agents there, but I kind of had my eye on one particular agent, and she was based in London. And she represented people that I really, really admired. At the time, she had discovered Lisa Jewell and Kate Atkinson, both of whom I still admire. And I thought, yeah, if I had a dream agent, she would be my dream agent. And I sent her the novel, and fortunately for me, she was on the lookout for an Irish crime writer. And back then, I wrote crime. She kind of coached me. She worked with me for a little while, sort of looking at the novels. We didn't manage to sell the Irish crime novel immediately, but she said to me at one point, she said, maybe you'll try something else. There's a great tradition in Ireland of, women's fiction and Vinci and blah, blah, blah. We have really fantastic female writers, as in that sort of genre where it's kind of women's fiction stroke, literary stroke, feel good. But and I said I hadn't really read anything like that in quite a while. I mean, I would have my stock favorites that I would read pretty regularly, but I didn't know what was happening in the market, and you kind of think when you're going to set off on something, you kind of need to know what's out there, But anyway, I sat down and I wrote something, and as I was writing it, I enjoyed it in a way that I never kind of enjoyed writing the other books. It was a completely different experience. And she sold that book to a new imprint that was being started up by Jesus. It was called Aria Fiction, and initially as an ebook deal. Now, when I had met Judith before that, she said, start reading on ebooks because that's the way everybody in publishing reads on kind of digital format. And I kind of had an idea what an ebook was, but I kind of didn't really know what being an ebook writer would look like. But very quickly, the books sold beyond their targets, and the company looked at transferring some of the ebook formats into physical book format. And mine was one of the chosen ones to go into bookshops. And that's kind of where it started. We went from there. We've reached and surpassed our targets every year. I think readers like what we're doing. And I think that's the most important thing, even as I sit down to edit today. I write books that I know I'm going to like to read. But when it comes to editing the books, it's really, I feel each book I've written has had more to it. And I feel this sort of pressure that I need to make it better. The next book has to be better for the readers who come back to me and said, oh my God, it's your best book ever. I want this to be better again. So that's kind of the route in a potted history version of kind of There to Here.
Yeah, that's fabulous. Well, I absolutely loved The Women at Ocean's End. So I'm looking forward to the next one if it's going to be even better. Could you tell us a little bit about The Women at Ocean's End?
So I've done quite a few festivals this year, and people say, I see some writers and they have like one line and they can encapsulate it. The bookshop ladies, I used to say, oh, it's the story about the wife, the mistress, and the daughter he didn't know about. The Woman at Ocean's End isn't quite as easy to fit into a box. So I start off by talking about the main character. And for me, in my mind, that is Constance. So I would start off by talking about Constance Mackin. And Constance Mackin is one of those dear little old ladies who lives in a faded Art Deco house at the very end, the very tip of an island off the west of Ireland. So she's basically, it's next up New York, if you happen to have a boat. And she's one of those little old ladies that everybody loves. When she walked around the island when she was younger, she's in her 9th decade. When she walked around the island, she was one of those women who had a trail of children and animals follow her everywhere she went to because everybody just adored her. But what they don't realize is that Constance hides a rather dark secret. This is a story about friendship. It's a story about new friendships, and it's a story about lifelong friendships, that one particular lifelong friendship that has been interrupted by this particular secret. All of my books are uplifting reads. So while it's emotional, you may cry, but by the end of it, you will be uplifted. And I think that's really important when readers come to my books, because I think when they pick up my books, they're summer reads. They are books that you can bring with you. The last one I was quite thick. I'm looking at a hardback version of it, but they are meant to be books for your travel bag. And they are books to escape into. Equally, I think there are books for the back garden where you can just dive into them. And by the end of it, I hope that having come to my world, you will leave it feeling better, uplifted, happy, joyful, and mostly hopeful. Does that kind of encapsulate it a bit?
It
Kind
does,
of?
yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I did feel all of those things at the end of it.
Oh, whew, thank you.
Yeah, it's a brilliant book, and Constance is such a great character. You described her in the article that you wrote for the August edition of Writing Magazine as being like all of us. She is on the one hand vulnerable, on the other fierce, and I think the fact that we meet her at 12 years old and again in her 90s helps show these two sides to her. How did that character come about?
Strangely enough, the book actually started with her mother. Her mother is a real force in the book, although we don't actually really, we do meet her, but we don't really meet her. But I think hopefully we feel that we get to know her by the end of it. Um, Constance, on the other hand, came about just after her. I knew the story would be about Constance, but I think it was her voice that kind of led me mostly along the path of her story. Her voice and her relationship with other people. I think if you can kind of tell, or if you have an idea of kind of people's friendships and lives around their story, it gives you a great insight into the character. It really helps you to kind of lead the story forwards in a way that's that kind of resonates, I think, for me as a writer and hopefully for the reader as well.
It's mostly based on an island called Pin Hill. The inspiration for the location is Achill, if I said that correctly, a small island off the west coast of Ireland. It's really beautifully
Yeah.
described. Why did you decide to set the novel there, and how would you say the setting adds to the story?
Okay. So a number of my previous books were set in a fictional village called Ballycove. And the fictional village of Ballycove is actually where I live. I've basically taken the best parts of the coastline all around where I live. So we have the sea, we have the woods, we have the woolen mills up the road, we have the gin factory down the road. So we have all these things on our doorstep, and we have the bathhouse, which is beautiful down there in Scrun. And I had come to the point with the Ballycove books. I wanted to deepen the books, and I wanted to I suppose maybe in a sense kind of wanted to darken them just a bit. Not I don't want to write thrillers, I don't want to write, but I wanted to give them, I suppose I felt that with depth they needed a slight darkness. And while islands are lovely places, my great memories of like books that really sort of drew me in and I felt as if I couldn't leave them, I was in the place, would have been books set in Ireland. So, and then there were none, or there were so many books over the years that were just set in Ireland. And I thought, actually, we have a fantastic, I mean, how, I don't know if any of you have seen the Banishes of Inisherin, but I leave my house and within about 40 miles, I'm standing on Achill Island, and it is the most beautiful, inspiring place you could actually imagine. And I thought, why not go and put it on an island? Now, in real life, Achill Island actually has a bridge that connects it to the mainland, which is very unfortunate for a writer. But I just took out the bridge. So yeah, so I think it added to the story. I had my good reasons for doing it. I may do 2 more books set on the island. I'm thinking that the next one will be set on the island. I'm working on it at the moment, and I liked it. I liked the idea of the island.
So the novel is a slight departure for you, I think. There's a darker thread, as you said, running throughout. It's a really important part of the story, though, and explains so much about the characters and the way their lives unfold. Why did you decide to explore that subject, and how do you go about writing the more upsetting scenes and keeping the balance of what is
Yeah.
ultimately a very uplifting story?
Yeah. The idea I suppose came to me, and I knew it kind of. I'm not going to say what the idea is because I think it would probably give the wrong idea about the book, because I have kind of in the book I've tried to handle it in a way that doesn't upset too much, and it is a very upsetting subject. It really is. It's a very harrowing subject. But I suppose my characters had quite a lucky escape. They made quite a lucky escape, shall we say. I felt that it was one of those things that I just wanted to touch on. And I had seen it being done in other books, something similar. Elizabeth Jane Howard would touch on something in her first Hazlitt Chronicles. There would be a situation in the relationship which is, you are very aware of it at certain sections of the book. And I thought she handled that very well, because when she wrote those books, in Ireland, our society has changed vastly, very quickly, like at an accelerated speed over the last, let's say, 10, 20 years. And some subjects were taboo, while they were very much a feature of our society. A lot of people didn't know they were there. And now they're there in a way that's very much in your face. And there's a lot of hurt, there's a lot of anger, and I hope there's a lot of shame. But I just really wanted to do something with it while not upsetting the reader excessively. I needed a very, very good reason for Constance and Dottie's actions. I needed it, and I couldn't think of a better reason.
Yes, definitely. I agree.
Yeah. That's like totally talking around a subject and not
I know, I
ever.
just don't want to ruin it for anyone.
That's brilliant. And can you take us inside your creative process a little bit? So, do you plot everything meticulously, or do you try and let the story unfold that as you write?
So am I a plotter or a penster?
Mm.
Yeah, so I suppose I see plotting and pantsing, like I see a lot of things in life. Our society, we have finally embraced the idea that nobody is one thing or another thing, and we are all on a spectrum somewhere in between. And I think plotting and pantsing is a bit like that. I'm currently looking at old notebooks that I have in the house. I just looking at stuff this morning before I left, and I think of myself as being, if you want to say pantster, that I just sit down and lose myself in the novel, which I do. I think the best parts of the book are written when my eyes are closed and my fingers are just moving across the keyboards, and there isn't a plan there. It's just coming from somewhere. I'm not so sure where. But I do, I suppose, sit down at various points and sort of gather my thoughts and gather together elements of the story, so that a story does have to run in a sort of you can go over and back, you can be past and present, you can be one character into another, but ultimately it starts at the beginning, it goes through the middle, and you finish up at the end, and it needs to be linear for all of the other components that make it up, if you know what I mean. I wouldn't have thought of myself when I wrote crime novels, very much a planner. I sat down and I planned those pretty much kind of to the very last chapter. But I do think that the editing process too puts a shape on the plan. The creative process at the start is all about just letting your imagination run riot. There are ideas to start out, but you don't want to kind of hold yourself back too much do you know what I mean? So that first draft is very much a boom, away we go. And I think, yeah, so it kind of works for me. I think everybody's different in the way that they write. I don't think there's any right way to write. I don't think there's any wrong way to do it. And I don't think that there's too many writers that would sit on either end of that sort of spectrum, if that makes sense. So I'd say I'm somewhere in the middle.
I was really interested because you've got the three different stories and the two different timelines within the book. I wanted to know if you always had wanted the story to be about the three different women at three different stages in their lives, and they're all missing an element of their original families, and then they find each other, or did the story start separately and then come together?
The three women, the three women in the present tense were always there. They were always there. Um, but the person who arrived late to the game was Dottie. And I think Dottie actually was crucial to the story. And Dottie came because my editor said, well, I think really we could do with seeing her more fully because she was absent, but she was present. But her presence or her absence, her character has a huge impact on two other characters in the story. I mean, you couldn't possibly imagine Heather without having grown up in the situation she grew up in, and you could judge Dottie really badly if you didn't see her backstory, I think. And I think it was a very good thing to put her in. So she was, wouldn't say lastminute.com, but she certainly didn't feature at the very start of the novel. The three women all did. And I think that each of the three of them had something to bring to the story. I think that while the story is about that other thread that runs through it, I think that they played a huge part in sort of letting us see who, for all of that had happened in the past, who Constance had actually become at the end of her life, or close to the end of her life. Yeah, so have I answered? I'm not sure if I've answered the question.
No, you have, yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's just really interesting because they're almost like three generations, but they're not related to each other. But then there's that idea of a found family, which I really liked
Yeah,
in the story.
yeah. There's a connection there, I think. There's a connection there between Heather and Constance because of the past, because of the relationship with Heather's mother. And I think I loved writing Roz because Roz is rootless, she's anchorless, and she's looking for somewhere to put down roots. And she wants it so desperately. At the moment in Ireland, we have a huge housing crisis. I'm sure it's similar. I know in London, I know you have similar challenges in terms of just cost of living and managing to live where you want to live. In Ireland, we actually have a huge shortage of houses, and houses are not being built at the rate that people need to have them. And Roz finds herself in the enviable position of having a job that she loves, a home that's provided for her, a whole new community built up around her. And prior to that, she'd spent 3 or 4 years just drifting. And the last time she really had stability was before her mother passed away. So she was one of those people I really, really wanted to write her. And I knew from the beginning what her story was going to be, kind of in the back of my mind. I didn't figure on George. I didn't figure on her. There's a very hunky neighbor. I didn't figure on some of those elements, but I knew kind of that I wanted her to go from one thing to the other, and I wanted her to find. I think a lot of my books too are about finding home. I think I had a book called The Place We Call Home, and I think at the back of my mind that whole thing is still there. It's about people finding a place they belong, and I think family. I think when readers come to my books, I hope it's like they walk into a family and somebody puts their arms around them and they say, "Gosh, you're really welcome, and we want you here." And I think she sort of typified that sort of that sort of vibe in the book this time.
That's a
Yeah.
really, really lovely description there. What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given by another writer or by anybody?
Yeah. It's the piece of advice I give to anybody who wants to write. It's just write. I remember after I wrote the first book and I sent it off to my agent, and I was kind of ready to sit back there and sort of wait and go dum de dum de dum de dum, wait for the deal to come in. And she said, "Well, crack on with the next one." Like, she's right. She's absolutely right. It's not just when you're starting out. It's when you have written the book, you've typed the end, you could drive yourself nuts waiting for feedback. You really could. You're much better on to crack on with the next one. And so very often while I'm writing, I have an idea coming for the next one. And that'll be sort of just, it'll be gurgling there in the back of my brain. And yeah, you just crack on with the next one. And I think it's the same for new writers coming up. You know, you go to events and you'll always know there'll always be somebody in the line to get their book signed. And I look at them, and generally they're young, and they're generally women, or they sometimes they'll be like a lad. And I say, "Are you writing something?" And their face just lights. You can just see their face just lights, because they may be a secret writer like I was. And yeah, and I just say to them, just keep writing. Just keep writing. Don't worry about anything else. Just keep writing. You can only edit what you've written. You can only sold what you've written. You can only, you know, that's it. Just write. You know. So yeah, best piece of advice I think ever.
It makes so much sense, doesn't it? And we hear that a lot from authors, especially like the ones that we've been speaking to on this podcast. One of their, like most of people's, most of the authors that we've spoken to, their best advice has been just write, just do it. We spoke to somebody a few weeks ago who said, if you write, then you are a writer. Just do it. And then you are a writer, so do it. Yeah, it's such simple advice, but very, very powerful. And what's next for you? Is there anything else that, I mean, I know you said that you're editing today, so is there a new book that you can tell us about?
Oh gosh, I'm not even so sure if I can tell myself about it at this point. I'm in the quagmire. Yes, there is a new book. It is due out in 2026. I wrote it last year, and I faffed about with it for about 6 months, wondering what was I going to do with it next. I sent it to my agent and then to my publisher, and they have now sent back edits. It is a story about most of my books have been about people coming together, and I wanted to write something different. So this is about people being torn apart, and it will still be uplifting, I hope. It is so far. It is actually quite uplifting. I love the ending of it. But yeah, and at the moment it's set on Pinhill Island again. We're having discussions about whether it should be there in Ballycove. It's a fairly serious edit if I change it around again, but I can do that. It's not, you know, when I walk through Ballycove, it's like walking through a very familiar place for me. So I'll often be going along and I'll meet somebody from a previous book. So in this book, I was walking along the road, or she was walking along the road, and we met Elizabeth from the Ladies Midnight Swimming Club, who happened to be just walking up a road on the island. And so yeah, so moving it around it's a bit of work, but it's not something I would panic about too much, you know. So I'm hoping it'll be set on the island. It is at the moment.
Oh, amazing.
Forward to that one. We always like to end by asking for a book recommendation. Do you have one for us?
So I tried to think about this last night, and because I knew I was going to be chatting to you this morning, and I tried to think about books I read earlier on this year, because I've read some brilliant books this year, and the only book that I didn't read this year, I read this ages ago. Rosamund Pilcher actually brought it with me today because I wanted to tell you about it. This is my copy of it. Rosamund Pilcher. Now everybody talks about Rosamund Pilcher, and they talk about the Shell Seekers, which is an amazing book, and it's the first book of hers I ever read. But September is my favorite book. September is a story about a big family. It's actually about two families, and one woman in the family decides that she's going to organize a huge party, and kind of a huge get together. But some members of the family haven't been home for a very long time, particularly one. And while the party is kind of the whole reason for the book, it's not really. You spend 3/4 of the time actually with the journey of various family members, their relationships, what's going on in their lives, where they're at, the idea of kind of their lives being quite different on the inside compared to what other people think they are on the outside. And then they converge on this beautiful location in Scotland. I loved it. It's a total comfort read. It's like, if you want to feel good after a novel, yes, there's a little bit of sadness in it. You will need the tissues, but oh my goodness, such an amazing read. Such an amazing read, yeah. So I said so it's an older book. It must be written 20 years, I'd say. But it's one of those books that I go back to again and again. It's just, yeah, really like it, and I love it. It's probably my favorite book at the moment.
I love that one. It's one that you keep coming back to, and it always comes into your head. Yeah, you know, it's a great book.
Have you read Have you read
I
Rosamund
haven't,
Pilcher?
but I'm going to add it to my list now.
Oh
It
yeah,
sounds
you
like
have
my
to.
cup of tea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She wrote at a time, I mean, her writing is very much of its age. You kind of have to sort of bear that in mind. There may be things that you wouldn't write that now, and you probably wouldn't. But they're just such comfort reads. I just think they're just, and they really, for me anyway, the stories and the descriptions of place, of people, they've really stood the test of time. They're just beautiful reads. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much, Faith. It's been such a pleasure to speak to you this morning.
Both of you. Thanks very much, Bethany and Mary. Thanks both.
Thanks again, Faith. That's been brilliant.
Thanks for tuning into the Write Club. We hope you enjoyed this episode and feel inspired to keep writing. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter at Writers Online, your go-to for writing tips, competitions, and exclusive updates. Plus, you'll never miss an episode of the Write Club. Until next time, happy writing.